Hi guys, and welcome to this quick FIA MGB video. I've got a customer that's dropped off a block to be machined, all the parts needed to build a good race engine, a cylinder head that was done by another company, and some other bits and bobs. So I thought I would just show where we're at with it and show it being built. This is the block, so it's been through the acid. I've rebored it, skimmed it. So what I've got to do now is put valve cutouts in, so I'll show how I work those out. I've got to put some cam bearings in it, line hone it, and then just get it nice and clean, ready for building. The cylinder head was supplied by another company, and I will show some of the data from that. We flow tested it actually, and we've had to change some of the porting on it. It didn't really flow the numbers that we expected it to, but with some slight alterations we have got the flow back up, but it's not quite where we'd have it, but still it'd be fine. Then I've just weighed the crankshaft, which is here, the flywheel, the clutch cover and the front pulley, because I'm going to dynamically balance them today. Then just polish the crank, put that through the cleaner. My customers had this wedged. They've done quite a nice job of this, so I'll show that. I should imagine it's going to be a little bit out, but I will show how far out it is, and then I'll show the cylinder head in a bit. But all the parts for the engine are in one of my cupboards in the engine build room. So we've got JE pistons, arrow rods, aluminium front and back plate, and then loads of Kent goodies, ACL bearings, yeah, just loads of good quality bits, helix clutch. But I thought I would just start the video. Obviously I've already part machined the block. I wasn't going to film it, but then I decided to. I'll show the balancing next, and then I'll show the cylinder head. What I will do now though is add some of the Superflow footage from testing the cylinder head when it first come in, and also I have recorded some of the data from reporting the cylinder head, so I can show some of the bits that I thought was pretty bad, and yeah, we'll go from there. My first job on balancing this crank assembly is to check the crankshaft first by itself. Now this has been wedged, so I should imagine it's going to be a little bit out, because it's very difficult to take the exact amount of weight off each plane when it's on the mill. So we're going to run it up, see how much adjustment it needs, and go from there. So the machine's now calculating. I've already preset the machine up. It's not actually that bad. So I'll hold the data and print it, and then basically this is saying the amount of weight it's out by. I'll switch that off. This is saying the amount of weight it's out by, and this is showing the degrees. This side of the machine is the flywheel side, and this side of the machine is the front pulley. So what I could do now is mark where I need to take the weight off it, and then either start to grind or drill holes to bring the weight in. But it's not that far out, it's quite good. So the next thing for me to check is the flywheel and the front pulley. So I'm running it up to 800 RPM, and the machine's calculating the speed. And there we go, so the front pulley's in and doesn't need any adjustment, but the flywheel is ever such a little bit out. I mean, it's not a lot, but we're going to get it perfect. So we'll get this to weight by spot drilling. So we need to go to 306 degrees and get this weight off it. Basically we need it in the green. It's already got some balancing marks from the manufacturer TTV, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of replicate their balancing marks. So I'm just putting a slight little drilling mark on there, not going in too deep because I want to see how that affects the weight. So So what I'll do is I'll carry on drilling that. I'm just going to go and sharpen my drill bit up a bit, roughly in the right place. It's taken a gram off it, so I'll show you it finished. It's a fair bit out, so we're going to get that in now. So once again, I'm just going to do a test hole just to see how much comes off it with one. So we're taking the weight off the right area, but it's going to need a fair bit of work because that's removed 5 grams and we've got to get that down from 70. So we'll get on with drilling. So now the crankshaft assembly is completely balanced. What I'm going to do is I'm just polishing where it's ran on the balancer on the wheels and where the belt's driven it, just to tidy all that up. So I'm going to polish all the journals, measure them, document the sizes, and then this will go in the hot wash for a few hours and then in the carbon wash just to make sure everything is nice and clear. So that's all the crank journals now micro polished, and I've made a note of the sizes in the engine build sheet. So now this has got to come out of here and be completely washed. And what I'm doing first is I'm testing some MGB cylinder heads on the Superflow machine. We've been using the Superflow machine last week testing some 3 litre Essex engines for some Group 1 cars that was racing at Goodwood, but we weren't actually allowed to film that. The customer didn't want us to, but the results were pretty interesting. The MGB, we've got to build both engines, so I can show what I want on this. Let me show you where we are with it. So this is my flow bench. It's a Superflow SF260, which runs Flowcom and the Performance Trends software. And then these are the 2 cylinder heads that I'm doing. So basically we're building an engine for a customer, which he's had a cylinder head done, this cylinder head here, and we've stripped this engine, which had a well ported cylinder head on it, but the head's got this oil way damage and thread damage down here, but the head I should imagine flows quite good. So this head here, the combustion chambers, I don't think it's ideal, to be honest. There's a few things in the porting that I'm not happy with as well. So what I thought I would do is, while I've got this head, I'm going to quickly flow test this and then flow test that so I can get some back-to-back figures. It's things like, if you look, let me get some verniers. If you look here between the 2 cylinders on this head, it's got 188 thou, but and then here on this head we're down to 140 thou, so there's a mil less thickness between these combustion chambers, which means the gasket could blow quite easy there. There's some bits in the combustion chamber that we'll talk about once I've had the results from the flow testing. We've got to build both engines, but like I say, my customer got this head done elsewhere. We just was fitting that to it. So I've put on the right size bore adapter onto the Superflow. I've used a gasket from a template for the stud holes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start with the head that I think is a good cylinder head. So I'm going to put some bounce springs on that, and then we'll start to get some data. So I've got the first cylinder head mounted to my Superflow. I've got 4 bolts, a gasket. I've got to put a spark plug in because what this is going to do on inlet, it's going to suck through the inlet port, and then on exhaust it's going to blow through the exhaust port. So if I don't put a plug in there, then it will suck through the plug hole and blow through the plug hole, and it will give a false reading on Flowcom. Next thing I've already put on is these are called bounce springs, and the purpose of them is they're just dead light, so when we open the valves at different increments, it hasn't got the really big springs to try and open, because it would just be impossible to try and open. So yeah, so we've got bounce springs on there. Then to open the valve, I'm just going to use a DTI and magnetise it to the surface of the cylinder head. I'm going to spin this round, and then basically I can use this thumb screw at the top here to open my valve at the increments that I want to open it at. I'm going to zero the gauge, and then when I open the valve I could do it in 50 thousandths increments until we get to whatever lift we want to open it to. So what I'm going to go and do is look up a Kent cam profile and see what the maximum lift is, valve lift is for that cam, and then I'll set that into the machine. So the next thing that I've got to do is start to put the data in the machine for what's this? Stop new test. I've got to put the data in the machine for these cylinder heads. Now the valve sizes are the same on the inlet and the exhaust on both cylinder heads, but what I will do is I will call this what this head is on the data, and put in all the head data as well, and then I will just change the name and some of the little settings on for the other cylinder head, because the stem is slightly smaller. It's asking me what kind of adapter I'm using on the port, which is here. So basically, because this would have an inlet manifold, a carburettor, and then it would have some kind of ram stack, it would have a radius going into the carb. It's the machine's asking if we're running a radius or if we are just going to run it with no radius. So I'm running it with a radius. I'm using plasticine for that. So we just stick the plasticine to the cylinder head, and then that helps the air flow into the port. Now, we don't need to do that on the exhaust, because it's just flowing straight out and into the cylinder head shop. So we're going to leave that with no radius. We're not worried about air trying to flow into that. We're getting air out of that. What I'm going to do with this plasticine is I'm just blending it all to the inlet manifold, so it's got a really good flow into the port, like that. So clay, no adapter on that, and then we're going to open the valve at 50 thou increments, and I'm going to lift it all the way up to 500 thou. I'm back. I've just put a hoodie on because I'm cold, and I've got a gas flow cylinder head next, so I want to put a hood up because I keep getting stuff in my hair, but I don't even know why I've told you that. Okay, so what the performance, let me shut the door. Oh, I can't actually, because I need the air to flow in for the machine. So what the performance trends software does is it takes the data from the Flowcom and just puts it into the software, so you can just read it a bit more clear. With Flowcom, you have to manually take measurements. This just does it, and it reads a certain number of tests instantly, takes the average, and then you can view it as a graph, so it's nice and easy to read. It just speeds everything up, and it's very, very user-friendly. So the first test point is 50 thou. So well, the first thing that we need to do is just test the leakage. So to do that, I'm going to switch the Superflow on. I've got it lit up so it's on inlet. I've got the machine set for intake. The inlet flow's open, the exhaust is all closed. And what it does is it tells us what range we need to be at. Now the range is for these orifices up the top. That's what allows the flow bench to breathe the right amount of monitored air. So for 50 thou, the software automatically puts us in the right area. It's saying that we need to test on range 2. On the back of the flow bench, it shows you what holes need to be open for what range you're testing at but it also shows you the 5 holes along the top, and it basically shows you a black dot for the ones that don't need to be there. So I'm taking this one out, which is number 2, and then I'm going to switch the machine on. It's quite noisy. I'm just testing for leakages at the moment, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do now is open the inlet valve 50 thou, and then there's a little arrow appeared here, and what that means is it's drawing in more air than what the software thinks it should. So we're going to open this up to range 3. We're going to change Flowcom to range 3. And then for range 3, it's both the ports open. And then what I'm doing is I'll take the reading when I see the flow CFM on my Flowcom. I stop either climbing or falling. As soon as it's averaging and it's going above, below, I take the reading because it's settled. So that's now. So we're just going to take the first reading, and then it starts to build the map up at the bottom. So now we've got to go to 100 thou. We're going to go to range 4. And range 4 is 1 and 3 open. So I'm going to take 3 out, put 2 back in. And once again, I'm going to keep an eye on my flow meter. And once it starts falling, or stops falling, I should say. So now I'll take another reading. So now I'm going to open it up to 150 thou. It's saying range 5. Range 5 on the machine is 1, 2 and 3 open. So I'm waiting for the CFM to stop falling. Which is now. Take another reading. So we're going to go to 200 thou now. We don't need to change the range because that's all still okay. So now we're going into range 6, which is 1, 3 and 4. So I'm putting 2 back in. Change it on Flowcom as well. Open the valve 50 thou. So 300 thou now. Now what I can test is with these are called these are made by a company called Thorpe Developments, and these are for testing the airflow for dead spots in the port. And then they also make these different size flow balls. So what we could do is we could place these in the port so they've got inch increments to see if we gain any airflow or lose airflow. Okay, so now we've got the data for the inlet. All we've got to do now is just back the valve opener off and then move my DTI to the exhaust. Like that. Okay, we've got to change the settings on the flow com, on the bench and on the software. So we're going to wind in the intake flow on the bench and wind out the exhaust. We're going to switch it over to exhaust as well. On flow com we're going to change it from inlet to outlet. And on the software we're going to light up exhaust. So now we're going to put back in the stoppers for the top of the machine. And then the first range it wants is 2, so I'm going to select number 2 on Flowcom, take out number 2 on the range. So open Flowcom on the machine and start to measure. So we're open to 50 thou. And it's actually telling us to drop this down to range 1. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So now it's saying range 3 for 100 thou. Range 4. And that's it. So I've now got my data for this cylinder head, inlet and exhaust on cylinder number 2. So I'm now going to mount the old cylinder head up for the other engine, and we're going to do the same test again. So that's the graph of the first cylinder head, which loads fine. So what I'm going to do now is change the title for this cylinder. So that's the 2 cylinder heads ran up, and I did get some odd readings on the first run up of it. So I've basically reset everything on the computer, gone through everything on the cylinder head and ran them again. I've also put some plasticine in the new cylinder head for the engine and got the flow a lot better, which means I can modify that cylinder head and make it where the numbers are not much different. But I will show you where we are with the figures. Just turn this round. Try and zoom in on it a bit. So they're pretty much line on line until 300 thou lift, and then the old cylinder head does flow a fair bit better. And then by the time we get up to 500 thou, they're in exactly the same spot. The cam that we're running though only lifts for 438 thou is what the book says, so around here. So from there upwards is just no man's land basically. We're not going to be in there. That's testing it now. The machine tests at 10 inches of water. The software corrects it to 28, but I've changed it so it doesn't correct to 28. It just reads at the 10 inches of water. So I've got both readings basically. Also, I think I was getting a little bit of leakage through the plate on the test stand for the old cylinder head. So once I'd got that to seal, it brought everything in line a lot better. It does flow better, but I think we can deal with that now. So all in all, a good test. We know where we need to be, we know what we've got to do to improve on it, and we can now move on with machining the engine and getting it built. I'm going to fit cam bearings in it and line hone it. I'm also going to reface this face because it's a bit of a mess around the water pump. So I'm going to stick this on the big head skimmer and just go across it to make it a nice finish. But yeah, if I can get the cam bearings in it today, get all the main caps cleaned up, torqued up, measured and then line honed, that'd be good. And then apart from that, this then is ready for wash and start to build. I've got to put the core plugs in and the oil gallery bungs, but that's a pretty straightforward job. I need to get the wire wheel in here to clean up all the rust and bits and bobs. This block's already bored and honed, so once it's all washed, I've got to set the ring gaps and then it is assembly. Oh, actually, the one other thing that I've got to do is go upstairs and measure the valve lift in the cylinder head just to make sure the exhaust valve isn't going to touch the liner, because I might need to put some small cutouts in it, but I'll show that being done too. So the cam bearings are in. I've scraped any of the high points in the bearings and then honed it to finish, and this is his race cam, which turns effortlessly with no oil in there either. So happy with that. Moving on to the next job. So now the cam bearings are done, I'm retorquing the main caps into the block so I can correct, if necessary, the main line. So what I'm doing is I've just cleaned up this mating face here all along the block. I've done that with a real nice clean file, but then put some smooth emery on it and then just gently run backwards and forwards over it, and you can see the high and the low spots. So no pressure, just backwards and forwards just to clean it up, to try and make it nice and flat. The caps, what I've done first is just cleaned them all up, wire wheeled them, clean the bottom up with the emery, have a measure up, and then if it's close, what I'll have to do is just machine the caps, take a few thou off the cap to reduce the circle, and then re-hone it back. But what I want to do first is just clean it up and have a measure up to see what I'm like for size. So our MGB gasket is 1 mil in thickness. So what I'm going to do now is work out whether the block needs extra valve cutouts. So to do that, I need a straight edge, or a straight edge. So what I'm going to do now is lift the exhaust valve until it hits the bottom of my straight edge, and then take a reading off the DTI, which is just coming into shot. There we go. So it's 7.9. So I'm going to make a note of 7.9. And then move over to the inlet. Zero the DTI. And then same again, but on the inlet stem. And we're touching at 8.4. 8.4. We know that there's 1 mil in the gasket, which takes us to 8.9. So I'm going to make a note of that. 8.9 and then 9.4. And then if we look at the cam data, we're running a Kent 719 scatter pattern, which is here, and we've got 11.13 mil of valve lift. So on the exhaust, we've got 11.13, and then minus the 8.9. So we need to open the side of the block up by 2.23 mil. So what I'm going to do now is, with no pistons, no crank, and only 2 valves in it, I'm going to just carefully bolt the cylinder head on the engine and then turn it upside down to look up to make sure that I've got enough clearance on the inlet valve. That should just be fine. That shouldn't hit. It'll be the exhaust valve that's hitting. So I'm gonna blue the top of the block up, bolt it upside down, and then I'm just gonna rotate the valve so it makes the mark on the top of the block, and then I'm gonna prep ready for just put in a milling cutter with a nice radius on it down the side of the liner to give us clearance on the exhaust valve. So this is up the inside of the bore, and as you can see, the exhaust valve is just touching the side of the cylinder. The inlet valve misses very easy, but the exhaust is touching. So I'm going to have to put some slightly deeper valve cutouts in there. So the cylinder head, which so the cylinder head, which was built up ready to fit, this is the one that we've superflowed and we've had to do some modifications to it. The inlet valve, which I've just taken out, is a little bit too tight in the guide. But the one thing that isn't great is where I've had the cylinder head moving around and things, bearing in mind the cylinder head come ready to fit, and all this here is glass bead from inside of the head where it's been shot blasted. So all of this, and this is me just turning it upside down to get them measurements off it. So if I put it on top of this red case, and look at all this, I've got to finish the combustion chamber off to get that right, because the combustion chamber's not that nice. There's some right funny shapes in there. There's no shrouding or de-shrouding of the exhaust. There's no real nice radius. There's a real nasty lump here as well. So I've got to sort this out, and then, I mean, I was going to wash it anyway, but I feel like I probably ought to remove, this is the only oil feed, but I feel like I probably ought to remove that to make sure there's none of the shot sat in, the glass bead sat down there. So what should have been a quick just get some measurements from it, check that it flows all right, and bolt it on. It really isn't that actually gone to show you, so there's definitely going to be a bit more trapped in there, but do you know what, that's part of getting it right, is to check everything and make sure it is right. So I'm going to mount the block on the mill, and you can see I've laid the hermetic gasket on top of the block surface, and then I've marked with the Sharpie where my gasket line is. From standard there is some very small cutouts in these blocks, so what I'm going to do is just clock off where I've marked it. I just caught the bore so I could see the centre of the valve, so I'm going to set it up off there, and then I'm going to move over towards my Sharpie mark a little bit, not too much because I don't want to risk getting close to any kind of waterway that could potentially here, so I'm just going to move it over a little bit and then come down here 3mm. So I've marked out exactly where my centre line is, and then I've just completed the first one. So the next job on the MGB is to check and correct the main line. So I've set my gauge up so it's on the top tolerance for the main line. There's half a thou to play with, and then I'm going to just measure each main housing. So this one is tight by 1 thou. The front one is 0.7 tight. The middle is to size. That one's 1 thou tight. That's to size. So what I've done is I've measured on this axis. Now I'm going to measure on these two axes as well. Yeah, so the ends in the middle are round, and number 2 and number 4 are out around and also need a bit of metal taken out of them. So the line owner's all set. I don't need much correction in this, so I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the stone, just light pressure. So the last thing to do now is to just recheck the measurements in the block. So where it needed more off 2 and 4 cap, you can actually see that it's taken more off them 2 caps. You can still see some of the original machining marks on 1, 3 and 5. So what I'm going to do now is just take a measurement throughout the block. It's looking like I need to do Oh no, they're all absolutely bang on. They're all on the top tolerance, apart from number 2 here, which is bang on the bottom tolerance, but they're within spec. That's it. So now with this, I'm going to take the caps back off the block, and then I'm going to put it in the cleaner for about an hour in the big hot tank, then take it out the hot tank and then give it a final wash in the carbon clean machine. So I'm just prepping the MG race engine now for final build. We had to strip it again. We dummy built it, or I dummy built it, took some measurements, then Sam stripped it, machined another 15 thou off the top of the block because we want to bring the piston up to near as damn it TDC. We're struggling to get the paint from our usual guys, so Bennett, our friend Bennett from Berkshire, Parts and Panels, come in and scanned another MGB engine and got us some of this paint to try. It has a little valve in the bottom that mixes the hardener in with it, so that's a 2-pack paint. So yeah, I'm really happy with that because the paint that we bought from Moss come through and it was brown. It's like it had a colour missing out of it. I've redone all the work on the cylinder head and made it better. I wish we'd have done our own head for it now, but as you can see off the data that we had, it didn't flow the best. So I've changed the combustion chamber. I'll show you that in a minute. I've changed inside some of the ports. So that's just waiting for the paint to dry. The sump is in the big cleaner, so Sam's going to paint that tonight for me, and then it's just final assembly and then ready for the customer to collect. I'm now doing the final checks on the MGB engine and starting final assembly. Really happy with the colour actually. I think it's a little bit brighter than the normal MG colour. This is the one that we've had mixed, and that is an original colour, so it is a little bit brighter, but either way it looks good. So I've got the rings on cylinder number 1. I'm now going to do the other 3 cylinders. I've done the oil control on cylinder 2, so it's the second ring next. But if I open up a set of rings, a full pack, I've got a blade here somewhere, don't need it. In the ring pack, there's a second ring, which is actually got a very small step there. That's a scraper, so that scrapes the oil down into the oil control ring, which is that, and then it has 2 small wire locks, and then it's a chrome barrel faced top ring. So one little trick that I do, and an old boy called Ray Riley showed me this when I first started building engines, is when I'm fitting the oil control rings, to always try and make sure that all 4 or 6 or 8 pistons, you just fit them the same way. It doesn't, on the oil control, it doesn't actually matter if you fit them that way or that way. It just looks better and everything's the same. So what I do is this top part here, which I don't know if you can see, I always have it where the last part, the split part of the ring, points up. So if I fit that onto piston 3, and I fit it at about 10 o'clock, make sure they don't overlap. Then on the oil rail, what I do is I hold them like that and I give them a squeeze, and whichever way they kind of point in, so that ring there, I would have it pointing towards the rail, and then if it was at the top it would point down, so it kind of traps the oil control ring in. And then I start off, so I check it, I put one at say 12 o'clock, like that. You see what that's done is that's made the rail overlap. Sorry, the control overlap like that. Okay, so start again. So I overlap it and then I keep my thumb roughly where the gap is, and then that stops it overlapping. And then just really carefully just flick it round onto the piston. Then I grab the second ring and once again give it a bend, and then allow that to just flick on as well. And that's the oil rail fitted. Okay, so the next thing is the second ring. So I put that right at the very top of the bore, and then with the first cylinder, which I've got the oil and the second ring on, I use that just to square the ring up in the bore. You can buy proper ring squaring tools, and I have got one for one bore size, but I would like to get you can get an adjustable one, so that's something that I do want to buy, or just do it. I remember that I want one when I'm building engines, and then by the time I get home I forget again. So it's a set of feeler gauges, and then what you want to do is just feel a little bit of drag on the gauge. So this one's at 22 thou. And that's the same. So that's those two at the right size, what I want to run. And then it's a case of putting the top ring in, both cylinders exactly the same. And then using piston very carefully just to square up the ring in the bore. Like that. And then I'll get some measurements off these and adjust these in the ring machine, which I'll show you as well. So I've got the rings. Actually, I didn't show you that being done, but I will show you where I do it. So I've got a total seal piston ring gapping machine, which is here. And I always try and do it with the lights off and just the torch over it. And the reason being is you use this part here to set the ring perfectly square in the machine. And with the big lights in, it kind of casts a bit of a shadow everywhere, and it's pretty tricky to see the edge. Well, it is with my eyes. So yeah, I do it in the dark with a torch over it, and then I can see perfectly nice and square. Then what I wanted to show you, and I did get asked this, sorry. So what I did want to show you, and I did get asked this before on a previous video, and I forgot to reply to it. So when I'm fitting the top two rings, I always make sure the gap is pointing each side of the pin, and the reason being is I don't want it on the thrust side of the piston, because that's where most of the load is, and we don't want it all, the compression trying to escape through that gap and extended wear where the gap is. So I always put the gap one side of the pin like that. And then the second, which piston's that piston? So the next ring along, I put opposite this. So we've got a gap here on the second and a gap here on the top ring. So that's all set now. The oil control's right. The second ring is right with the step, so it scrapes the oil into this. I'm running a slightly wider gap in the second ring than what I am the top, and then the top ring set. So this now can be mounted to the rods, and we are running Arrow precision rods in this engine with JE pistons. So I've got cylinder number 1 mounted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this into the cylinder, turn the engine upside down, put the crank in, put this in, and then just double check that we've machined the right amount off the top of the block before I get too carried away. Although I'm 100% confident in it is right. So I've got the pistons in, I've measured the deck height of the pistons, and it's 4 thou. So the piston is down the bore by 4 thousandths of an inch. So I've got a little valve cut out there for the exhaust valve, and with the piston being also 4 thousandths down the bore, it means that we have got 2.3 cc's in the block. So I've made a note of that. I've made a note of what the gasket's got in it. Then what we've got to do is work out the cc's in the cylinder head to know what the compression ratio is. So that's a calculation of the bore and the stroke, which gives you the swept volume, and then we work that out with what's in the gasket, the block and the cylinder head, and that gives us our compression ratio. What my customer has supplied is a new thrust plate and a new aluminium back plate. This back plate is lovely. It's made by Specialist Components. It's the first one of these I've seen, but I'll be using these again. Very nice quality, black anodized. So I'm putting all new hardware in this as well. So we've got new quarter UNF set screws going, or bolts I should say, going in here. We've got new shape-proof washers as well, and then 5/16 UNF that holds the plate on. Another couple of jobs that gets overlooked on MGBs is checking the camshaft end float. Like the crank, the cam needs a bit of end float. There's a steel and bronze plate in there, and because of the worm gear on the camshaft, it will always put a little bit of front load on it. So what you want is a little bit of end float like that there. And what I'm going to do is I will put the gauge on it to show you. So with a DTI, normally you could put it on the back plate, but because this back plate is aluminium, we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to connect it to the nut on the front of the camshaft, and then I'm going to, instead of fitting the dial gauge to the end of the cam, I'm going to fit the dial gauge to the, or I'm going to zero it on the block like that. So with the dial gauge zeroed, if I just ease that all the way towards me and then push it all the way in, I'm at 0 when it's all the way in, and I'm at 7 thou when it comes all the way out. And 7 thou is about perfect for that. So it's good, there's no adjustment needed there, but that is always well, not always, a lot of the time overlooked on building MGB engines. So the other thing is, when you fitted a new camshaft and crankshaft gear, the crank has different shims fitted on this side, and what that is for is space in the crankshaft gear away or towards the inside of the block. And what we're after is not really any step between this chain face and that chain face. So what I use is a little 6-inch steel ruler, and I connect it, or I rest it on both sides, so the top and the bottom of the camshaft, and then get it to the crankshaft. And then what I'm looking for is, if this is too far in, there'll be a gap on the crankshaft. If this is too far out, there will be a gap on this bottom side of the camshaft. And what we've got there is a perfect lineup. So I have had to just tweak the crank off camera a little bit, but now it's absolutely spot on. And what that stops happening is it stops the chain running under any kind of load. So with that all set, I can now take my crankshaft gear and my camshaft gear off, put the chain on and set the cam timing. The next job on this is I'm going to torque the bottom end up now. These are arrow rods. They come with ARP bolts. They're an ARP 2000 bolt. So to find the torque setting or the stretch setting with all my engine paperwork, each rod has got a different engraving on it. It's got the date, the serial number, and one of the numbers is the bolt that's added. So this is a bolt E. So when you look in the chart, bolt E is an ARP 2000. It's 3/8 UNF, and it has a stretch of 5.5 to 6 thou, which is roughly 44 foot-pound of torque. Now, we stretch all the bolts up that can be stretched, and to do that we use an ARP stretch gauge which looks like this. The bolt is machined, so these 2 points sit inside the bolt. Then we just put, first of all I nip the rod up and then back the bolt off, and then we just put the gauge on the bolt like that, zero it. And then what I do is I use a torque wrench. I set the torque wrench to the setting, so 44 foot-pound, like that. But then what I do is I'll nip them up to say 20 first, and then I'll measure the stretch. And then I'll go to 30. And then measure the stretch again. So we've got 3 thou at the moment. So now I'm going to go to 40. That's 4 thou. So now I'm going to go to 44, which is what they recommend roughly the stretch will be. We'll go to 47 because it's not gone in at that. Yeah, so 47 is the number that bolt stretched in at. So I'm setting that 0 now. And then I'm going to repeat the process. But this time I'll go straight to 35. Then have a measure. Yep, 5.5 thou. So I'm going to get a paint pen and mark these 4, spin it over, do them, and then run through the mains. The next thing I'm going to do is take this oil pump apart and high flow it. So I'm going to clean up all these bad burrs and things in there. So that's my next job. So I've got to strip it by undoing these 2 10mm. We've also checked the CCs in the cylinder head, and the guys, like I said before, this isn't our cylinder head, but it's been measured wrong. Engraved onto the cylinder head is 36.5 cc's, and we've measured it twice and got it at 38.4. So yeah, I don't know quite what they've done there, but I'm going to get this pump stripped and I'll show you how I flow them. So with this engine coming in, and it was mainly going to be like me machine it, get the compression ratio right and set the cam time in. We've put a bit of a windage tray in the sump, or I should say. So what I'm going to do is I just want to get all that bit pinned up, and then it can sit on its sump face or flat part of the sump for me to set the cam time in. So my customer, I'm just letting him replace one of these oil strainers and all the hardware for it. So there's 3 long studs to be screwed into the block. I would have put new nuts on it anyway, so that's all fine. Yeah, so he's going to replace the strainer and the oil pump drive. I've high flowed the pump, so what I've done there is when the pump sits like that, the oil sucks up and it goes through the pump. It runs up through the pump, up through this passage here, and then in to the actual rotors, into the gears of the pump, which creates the pressure in the pump. Now, an old tuning trick from back in the day is you would just open up this bottom passage so it feeds the pump from both sides, or feeds the rotors from both sides. So I've done that, deburred it, got rid of all the flash marks out of there. I've also deburred inside here and just opened up some of the oil ways and in this part here, just to make it flow a lot better than it was before. So what I'm going to do now is just make sure there's no burrs in there, which there shouldn't be because it's had a cartridge roll rattle around in there. Yeah, no, it's fine. I've washed it off in the high pressure cleaning machine that we've got. So I'm going to build the pump up off the engine. You can sort of build it in bits, but the reason I like to build it off the engine is so I can make sure that once the 2 bolts here are tight, that the pump still turns okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just coat the inner pump wall with some build lube. Then it's the outer rotor. Make sure that turns nice. And then I'll put the build lube all on the inner rotor. And fit the pump like that. And then I'm going to pre-lube with build lube so it's nice and sticky and clingy, some of the gaps there. And what that will do is as soon as the engine is cranking, it will encourage, the suction will encourage the oil to just get sucked straight up out of the sump and through the pump and then into the engine. Like that. And then, where's my screwdriver? I've had it. There. And then basically you should still be able to turn the pump nice like that. So I'm going to get the 2 locking nuts for this. So they're nipped up. So once again, I just want to make sure that my pump turns nice, which it does. And then it's a new gasket for the bottom. These are 7/16 UNF size, quarter, as in the spanner size. The thread size is quarter UNF. You can see the actual build lube starting to come out the pump body when I turn it upside down. So we're going to tighten these up now. The only reason I try and paint pen everything is so that I know that I've torqued them up or tightened them up. Not necessarily torqued them up, but tightened them up. Because I'm a bit forgetful. Right, so next thing I'm going to do is install the drive. So once again, we're going to coat everything quite nice in build lube. And now I'm going to find the studs to bolt the oil pump down. So I forgot to show you, but I've basically put all new bolts around the sump with washers and spring washers. So that's all tightened up now. I've got to turn it over by hand quick just to make sure that nothing's catching the baffle, but it shouldn't be. And I'm going to set the cam time in, so I'll show you that bit next. So the first thing that I've got to do is put the protractor on it with a pointer, and then it's roughly at TDC, but it's not accurate at the moment. So I'm going to put the DTI on here and then find the dwell point of TDC, find the centre of that, and then set TDC up on my protractor with piston at true TDC. And then what we're trying to do is find out how many degrees the inlet valve is fully open at. So I'll get it all prepped and ready, and then I'll show you. So I've got the DTI virtually smack bang in the middle of the piston. You can set TDC once you've got the cylinder head on, but because the plug's in at an angle, it's just a bit trickier. So I do it while the head's off, and then just be very careful with the front end. I've nipped this bolt up here, but I'm not going to be turning the engine over off the front of the crank. I'm going to be using the back of the crank. So, because what I don't want to do is risk moving any of this. So this is just the way that I always try and do it if I can get to the back. So what I'm going to do first is just watch for the needle to stop, because that is virtually TDC. I'm going to then move my pointer to mark TDC on the front here, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the dwell point. So I'm going to move back off TDC. I'm going to bring my DTI, or bring the piston up and watch my DTI. And when I get quite close, I'm going to take a marking, a reading. So when this is at 80, it does, the reading's not important. It's important that you go back to the same point. So I'm going to take a reading from there, which is 7, and then I'm going to go past TDC and then back to 80, and then take another reading, and that's 6. So that means that my point is ever so slightly off. So I'm just going to move that half a degree, which is the figure that I'm looking for. Which is that. And then go back, do the same again. So take a reading at 80. And then go past it, go back to 80. And it's exactly the same reading. So I know that TDC is bang on. So I'm going to move it just back to TDC. Now, because I'm setting this at degree, like maximum lift, I could now do it off the push rod, or I could fit the cylinder head and do it off the back or the front. If you're setting it at lift at TDC, and it's a rocker with a ratio, it's important that you fit the rockers to it, because like on one of these where I think the rocker ratio on this is 1.69 to 1, is it? Oh no, sorry, 1.42 to 1. So basically, well, I can show you one here actually. This cam, lift at TDC, is 3.8 mil, but that's valve lift. So if we was to try and set it on here, we would probably we'd be setting it 1.42 times more lift at TDC, which would mean the timing's out. But when it's degrees, we are just looking for the period of it being fully open on its dwell. So what we can do now is fit the cam followers and set it off the push rods. But the first thing I can do is I can bolt the cylinder head down. So I've got an old push rod. I've set the old push rod up onto number 1 inlet valve. I've started to bring the engine round so the inlet valve is becoming fully open. I've stopped it on 30 on my gauge, and I'm going to take a reading off the protractor at the front, which is 75. Need to calculate. So I make a note of 75. I then keep turning the engine in direction of rotation. And what I'm going to do is go back to 30. Which is just there. I'm going to take another reading, which is 123. So then I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to go 123 minus 75 equals, then I want to find the middle of that number. So divide it by 2. It equals 24. And then I add the 24 to the 75, so plus 75. So at the moment my timing is set at 99 degrees. And what I'm looking for on this particular cam is 103 degrees. So we need a 5mm Allen, and then I'm going to undo all of these vernier bolts, and then I'm going to move this timing this way by 4 degrees, and I'm going to nip just 2 of them up to start with, and then I'm going to do nearly 2 engine revolutions to get us back to where the inlet valve is opening. So I'm watching the push rod. I'll get round out the way. Okay, so we're now, the inlet valve starting to lift, so I'm going to watch this until I get quite close, and I'm going to pick a different point on my DTI this time. So if we go to 35, we'll take a reading, we've got 85, and then go back to the same point, just there, take another reading, 122. So now we're on 103.5, so I'm really not fussed about half a degree, but what we'll do is go around again and then find a completely different point to take the reading from. And I like to check it 3 times once I know that I'm in the right kind of area. So I'm going to check it quite a bit earlier this time. We've got 71, 136. So we do 136 minus 71 divided by 2 plus 71 equals, and once again 103.5. And then once more for good measure, but this time I'm going to take the reading closer. And then that kind of gives me a spread of the dwell of the nose of the cam. You can't do it on every cam because sometimes the closing ramp is different to the opening ramp, but when you're that close to the top I don't think there's much difference. So I'm going closer this time, so we've got 92, 15, 115, it's 92 divided by 2 plus 92. And once again 103.5. So I'm happy with that, but that's how I do the timing. If I had the push rods and everything for this engine, what I would then also do is fit the push rods, set the tappets, and then also measure the valve lift to make sure that that's correct. But now, to be honest, this engine's pretty much done. I've got to put some bolts in the back to hold this alley back plate on. I'm going to bolt the flywheel to it. My customer needs to fit his spigot bearing, so I can't put the clutch on it, and he's got all the front end here. But apart from that, we're done on this one. What do you think to the engine? It's a pretty good spec. I might get rid of all the bit on the back there, I'm not too sure. I'm going to tape all the bits up on it, because he's got all these bits, and then put it in a bag, or I'll put it in a bag when he gets here so he can see his engine built up. But the alley plates look cool. What do you think to them? So that's specialised components they come from. I quite like them. And yeah, any questions, drop them in the comment section below. And if not, if you could do me the favour of just leaving the word MGB in the comment section, that would really be appreciated as well. And we'll see you on the next video. And thanks for watching, guys. See you later. Ta-ra.